It's not available.
بيكون في ترجمة تلقائية للغة العربية. Welcome back to QRTA Talk. Today I'm delighted to be sitting with three wonderful ladies. We would like to know who's with us today as well. So if you could please let us know your names, where you're from, why you're here, maybe some expectations that you have. أهلا وسهلا Nada, Fauzi, thank you for joining. أهلا, welcome. Ooh, we have Kuwait, Amman, Jordan. أهلا وسهلا ميسون. أهلا. قطر, Kuwait, Lebanon, Irbid. أهلين. Wonderful to have you all. Egypt, Oman, Saudi, UAE. Excellent. Palestine. Wonderful. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you everyone for interacting and engaging. Someone's asking how they can كيف الترجمة. في على زوم أيقونة عليها زي كوكب الأرض. إذا بتكبسيها وتختاري اللغة تقدري توصلي على الترجمة التلقائية. I hope يعني this helps. Excellent. Okay. I'm going to kick off. I'm going to give our guests the chance to introduce themselves. We have Shaylin, Rania, and Catherine. We can start with you, Shaylin.
Sure. مساء الخير. أهلا وسهلا فيكم. My name is Shaylin Carey, and I am a portfolio director within the Professional Education Division at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. One of the programs that I direct is the Middle East Professional Learning Initiative. So a special hello and welcome to any of our fellows joining this evening. Our program is a fellowship program for educators across Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine that empowers them to support their communities through addressing their problems of practice by engaging in coursework with us and our faculty. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for hosting us.
Our pleasure. Always our pleasure. They're friends of QRTA. Always happy to have you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Vanya Page. I'm a psychologist at Boston Children's Hospital, and faculty at Harvard Medical School, and part-time faculty at Graduate School of Education at Harvard. Delighted to be here.
Wonderful.
Hello, my name is Catherine Merseth. I am a retired faculty member from the Graduate School of Education and Harvard College. I'm delighted to be back with QRTA. I've been here several times. Some of you may know that we've worked together in building a case collection of practices in classrooms and of leadership here in our country.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for your time and your energy. Thank you in advance. So today we're going to discuss building a school culture to support community well-being. How do we do that as educators, as leaders? How do we go about it as individuals or as a system as a whole? And we're going to start with a little imaginary scenario. So if we imagine a school or a system that's just beginning this journey of building community well-being, there is no comprehensive strategy, limited resources, and perhaps little shared language about well-being. What are some steps, one or two actions that schools can take to start this journey and build this culture that is supportive of well-being?
Well, let me start. I think one of the most important things in schooling is to have a clear sense of why this school exists. What is its purpose? Is it here only for academics? Is it here for the social and emotional well-being of students? Should it serve the families? Should it serve the community? Perhaps people who do not have children in the school. What is the role of the school? And so for me, thinking about the culture and how to establish the culture has everything to do with starting with a collective conversation about the purpose. And don't be surprised if you ask your colleagues, your teachers, your families, what is the purpose of this school? you'll find very different ideas. And that's where we begin to build the culture.
Excellent.
And I think I would add to that, really thinking about starting with the community and not the program. So really thinking about what is the community's understanding of well-being. Things like where do students feel safe and connected? Where is stress and disconnection? What's already working? What's not working in your systems? Often, especially under resource systems, we want to focus on what we have and build from that versus feeling like we have to build something new. And as part of that, I always say, look for strengths. So survey your community, ask questions of your community, look at past data you have to really understand. And then secondary to that, and I think that was part of your question, is defining well-being from your community, right? So what does well-being mean for your students and your families and your teachers? And really balancing this, what does the research tell us, but grounding it in the voices of those you serve. Keep it simple and accessible, focus on everyday conditions of safety, of relationships, and make it everyone's responsibility, not just your clinicians in your buildings, but really your students first and foremost, because they're your greatest stakeholders, your families, your teachers, your principals, and so forth.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, and I would, pulling out a piece of that and specifically focusing on the teachers themselves. One thing that I've really learned and witnessed through our community of practice across the region is that having a community of support of fellow educators is so critical to making this work successful. So I would say if the school is able to build opportunities for teachers and other leaders in the school to create professional learning communities, and maybe they're reading the same book together that's centered around well-being, or they're taking a course together, because this work can't be done alone. And I think that also sets such an important model for the rest of the school community. I'm going to borrow your words here, Dr. K. I've heard you say this before, show me a school where the teachers are learning, and I know that the students are learning. So starting that modeling from there, because teachers are really the ones that have the biggest impact on the school.
Yeah, I agree. So just to sum up what you were saying, we were thinking about the student at the center, we're thinking about the teachers, the leaders, we're thinking about families because they're partners in this as well, and they're part of the community that we're building as a culture in the school. We're thinking about the needs of a school when we operationally define well-being for that specific system and what the needs are for that institution. And it might be different from one institution to another. And I'd like to circle back to what you had mentioned, which is the casebook that we are very happily partnered with you to create at QRTA. And we think about some of the case studies that are in that casebook do talk about well-being, or of course, in some way or another, well-being is always embedded in teaching. It goes hand in hand. How do you think that some of the cases in that book can help educators maybe take steps forward towards that goal?
I think when you use cases, it's exciting to think up what you would do, how you would do it, why you would do it. But once you've had that conversation with an entire group of people, it's really important to pull back and say, now, what do we see? What have we learned? And you have your own perspective, but the power of discussing a case is the community and hearing what you said and hearing what you said, and then helping me think, oh, I hadn't thought of that before. That's a really good idea. It broadens my perspective. And that's what a case can do, is really help you think more broadly, but also more specifically about your particular situation.
Excellent. Thank you. One underlying theme, it seems, even from the get-go, is communication. So you communicate within your community, you communicate with the outside community maybe as well. So that's one of the competencies that every partner in that community needs to, again, build towards the goal of community well-being. So if we think of communication as a competency that an educator should have, and thinking of if it's fair to say, educators or teachers as architects of school culture. I'd like your opinion on what knowledge, skills, competencies do you think educators need to foster a culture of trust and connection and belonging and resilience in classrooms, where we know that this can have a ripple effect outside of the classroom as well?
Well, let me start by talking about teachers, because teachers are the lifeblood of schools. Let's face it. We have administrators, we have people that help us with the food, the bus drivers, the various maintenance people, but it's the teachers. The teachers are essential. And therefore, when you ask about what competencies, it strikes me that, particularly talking about communication, teachers need to be given permission and time to work together. Teaching generally is a lonely occupation. We have a classroom with 30 students and one teacher and the door is closed. And I don't know what's happening next door. That needs to be broken down. We need to work together. We need to collaborate. We need to plan lessons together, to try things together, to have one teacher come into a classroom and watch you teach. It's very rare, at least in the United States, have another teacher come in and watch you teach. Teaching can be very private and very isolating. So the key competency will be breaking down that isolation. We talk about schools as egg crates. Each pocket, we need to open it up and engage teachers so that, and giving them the time. I mean, I know there are teachers watching here and saying, well, that's great, but I have a full schedule and 30 students. No, the administrators need to acknowledge that the answer lies with the teachers.
Anything else to add?
I mean, I always think of these kind of three core buckets of competency. One, how do we build sense of safety, both physical and psychological safety in our classrooms? Things like routines, rituals, things that we set in stone that becomes part of regulatory system. I think about relationships. You know, research time and time tells us that teacher-student relationship is the strongest predictor of student outcomes compared to every other intervention that we put into place. So how do we really invest in teacher-student relationship, peer-to-peer relationship, family-to-school relationship? And then thirdly, I think about how we build sense of agency in young people, give them opportunities to speak up, give them opportunities to set goals, give them opportunities to be architects of their classrooms and their schools, and have ownership of their learning, really.
Could I just add to that? I think for all of you watching and for us here, if I asked you to think about the most important teacher you've had, chances are that person and that vision comes immediately to mind. And it underscores what Vanya has just said, which is the relationship that the teacher has with the child is forever, and therefore the most powerful intervention.
Excellent. And I think just listening to Catherine and Vanya talk, it made me realize as well, as I was once an educator, I was a teacher not long ago, everything that both of you said, so permission and openness to engage, advocacy, relationships, routines and rituals, all of these are applicable to, again, the different layers of community. So student, whether it's students to student, parents or families, educators, leaders. So these are the elements that each layer can apply and think about. And I think it's really important that we keep thinking that this is applicable to when we think about community. Yes, the kid, the student is always at the center of how we make decisions, but also we need to be thinking about, if we're thinking about a building, a community where well-being is embedded in every layer, then we need to always be thinking about all of these at the same time.
And just to that point, impact on one piece of that community has ripples on all the others.
Exactly.
You know, so you can think about it almost as a web of, you know, the child's at the center, but the policies and procedures on the whole school level the impact will ripple down to that student, to that teacher, to that classroom, to that family, and vice versa, right? Like what we do on an individual level, on a classroom, will ripple up all the way. So there's this bi-directional relationship that you're describing that goes back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it's again, we need to keep thinking about that and thinking about how do we make this actionable. We're saying all of this. How do we make this actionable for a teacher? How do we make this actionable and concrete for a leader? How do we make this actionable and concrete for a family? And how do we help kids at every age and advocate for themselves and say, this is what I need and this is how I would like to achieve well-being in a way. And this also makes me think of MAPLI as a program and how and what it offers our educators in this region to achieve this goal. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you think MAPLI as a program builds the capacity for our teachers in this region to support their colleagues in general.
Right. So I started working with the MEPLI program August 2019. So we're coming up on 7 years.
Oh, right.
And exactly. So shortly after I began, on came the COVID pandemic. I was actually in Jordan early March 2020, coming to attend the Teacher Skills Forum. That was then transitioned to, virtual later in the year. But I remember during that time, our community, we had 3 cohorts by that point of MEPLI fellows, and we could see that a lot of them were struggling with, adapting to online learning, with their own mental health needs, the mental health needs of their communities. And so we started just holding sort of virtual meetups. They were very open. They were, not scripted, not facilitated, just what's on your mind. And some folks would react to that, offer advice or support. Mostly we were just listening to each other. And we ended up turning some of those conversations into tangible materials. We developed an online course that was focused in collaboration with QRTA, that was focused on that transition to online and blended learning. And I remember sort of coming out of that experience. We were in a call with a group of fellows, and there was one fellow from Lebanon, Nahla, who said that MEPLI was a pillar in the storm, that there was all of this chaos happening around them in every aspect of their life, at home, at school. But to be able to come back to this community and rely on each other and offer words of support and encouragement meant so much. So I think the power of communities of educators is so critical. And to be able to build upon that in so much of the uncertainty that we're seeing now with our colleagues in the region, we still have fellows that are engaged from the very first year, 2018, that are, in Palestine and Lebanon and Jordan and Gaza, who we are still, in touch with and supporting in ways that we can. And so I think that just goes such a long way, and keeping educators in the field as well, where there is a lot of kind of turnover and folks, wanting to turn to something that, maybe makes more money or or isn't as difficult. But I think having a community can keep folks in it, can keep folks motivated, and offer a lot of hope.
Yeah. And I think sometimes because teaching can be a lonely profession in a way, you're in your classroom, you have your own things. We sometimes forget that your greatest resource is just next door.
Right.
And if you just knock on that door and say, hey, like, do you have a minute? And they'll have a minute, 100%, because empathy is really high, and we all know we're going through the same thing.
Right.
So just always reminding ourselves that the community of educators that we're building, whether MEPLI or other systems or programs, or even just in the institution that you're in, that's one of your greatest resources is your.
One of the things I've noticed, being a faculty member in many of the MEPLI projects, is the interaction across cultures, across teams, across countries. And these people really come to belong to each other, and they feel responsible. What's the project you're working on? What's the project how can I help?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's
Regardless of what's on your plate.
exactly.
How can I help?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a very teacher thing to do
Absolutely.
and say.
Mhm.
Also thinking about where we are now, and thinking of the context in which our schools are operating and our teachers are teaching. Many of schools, whether in the region or even globally, are operating in contexts where there's a lot of uncertainty or conflict or heightened stress. And yes, we think, okay, first thing we think, what role does the teacher have in alleviating the stress for students? But I'd like answers for that question, but also, how do we support teachers alleviating this stress? How do we create a system, again, thinking about well-being and culture? How do we create systems that are more proactive than reactive when it comes to uncertainty or stress? Because we know that these are certain in life. So just thinking about, I know it's a lot, but thinking about these layers of student, teacher, system again.
Yeah. I think it can be very overwhelming to think about where to start.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very normal human reaction.
Mhm.
And yet, to me, there are kind of three things that I kind of turn to in terms of where do you start? And one I always think about, and you've alluded to this with your question, is build the conditions before you need them.
Mhm.
And if I can make many posters that say prevention, I think often schools are designed, unfortunately, to be more reactive than proactive, right? And yet, to be able to respond in times of uncertainty and sometimes prolonged uncertainty, it really is about prevention. And I think especially, acknowledging that we're in August and school is about to start.
Yep.
What a great time to think about, as teachers, what is the classroom and the conditions that I want to create in the space that kids are walking into, right? What is the story of this school year that I want my students to have in our school? So I think about, and often equally then as teachers, we feel like, well, what's in my control? What's not? I'm reading the news, I'm overwhelmed. And I think classrooms are such important places that actually we have a lot of control over. Once that child walks in, that is your community, that is your space. So I think about things like, as I said before, predictability. So what are your group norms in your space? Do you post agenda to prepare kids? Because the more kids know what's coming, the more they feel a sense of control and predictability in that space. Things like relationships, greet them by name, check in, ask how their summer was. Spend some time, even though you probably have already lists of things you need to do, spend some time to build cohesive community in that space in your classroom. Belonging, help students know they feel valued and understood in that space, not just with you as a teacher, but also with each other. You may have new students, you may have returning students, you may have students that have different perceptions of what school is or experience that they've had. Practice regulation in schools. So grounding, breathing, movement, create a rhythm in the space that you are in that helps regulate nervous system, which can be really good when we're feeling sense of uncertainty. And again, I go back to like meaningful choices in spaces. How can kids feel like they have ownership? The second thing I think about is regulated adults help kids regulate. I always say before kids can use their own nervous system, they need us to help them learn how to use their nervous system. So if you think about a little one, that falls in the playground, the first thing they do is what? Look at the parent. And if the parent, reacts in a strong reaction, the first thing we potentially see from a child is strong reaction themselves.
Mirroring the reaction.
If the parent, can, and I think it's the same thing for classrooms. The more that we as adults can first have a sense of our own regulatory system and know when we need a moment, know when we take a few breaths, the more that we can then help young people feel calm in our spaces. And that's not to say that we don't feel things, that we don't have strong reactions. In fact, I think modeling is really important in front of young people to tell them when we're having a hard time, but it's more what we do in that moment, how to respond. That's really important. And then I think the third piece that you're bringing up is systems. It's not, just the role of teachers to do this, but it's what are the systems we put into place. And the more that we know those systems in times of crisis, the more we can, lower the temperature in our schools and have people feel like they're prepared for what's coming.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I talk to beginning teachers about is when you're having, particularly with somewhat older middle school, high school, having a disagreement, is rather than having their wind in your sail, take your sail out of their wind. So just step back. Don't jump in. Don't match the trauma. So take your sail out of their wind. And then start the conversation.
Yeah.
I think we underestimate the value for adults of self-awareness and being aware and then managing your own emotions and modeling how you manage. So a lot of things that you were saying, some teachers might not know how to start, or some kids definitely might not know how to start. They need time to learn to self-regulate, but also teachers might not know how to do it outwardly in a way that they can teach kids. Or again, thinking about the culture of well-being, if I want to model or be a role model for these kids, how do I do that? So like deep breathing, or thinking positive thoughts, and doing this out loud with kids. And if they ask you, are you okay? Learning how to say, I'm working on it and this is how I'm doing it, and without revealing anything else. Just letting the shared humanity, I guess, be
Yes,
very
beautiful.
visible.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Across, again, community at large, student, teacher, family, leader, and then system.
And to that note, just also recognize that this won't affect all of us the same.
Yeah.
To the very point of that recognizing the kids potentially who've experienced trauma, who experienced displacement, refugees may have stronger reactions to moments of uncertainty than others. So also acknowledging and knowing your students. That's why that community building in the beginning of the year, doing a short survey, doing some games to really get to know who's in the room will help you prepare in times of distress to know, oh, this student may need more support today compared to somebody else. So also knowing that, yes, what research tells us is, yes, we have this nervous system, we have fight, flight, or freeze response, and in times of stress, we traditionally respond in certain ways, but also recognizing the unique qualities of all of us, and how to be able to kind of pivot when something is happening.
I think related to that, again, is imagining for every student in front of you, they have a label on their forehead that says, every one of them, I am important. I belong. Hear me. Listen to me. Know my story. And then react.
Right.
I am important.
I think another important component that we've mentioned but haven't talked about in detail is the role that families play in all of this, especially as educators are preparing to go back for this coming school year. Setting a strong foundation and open line of communication with family members is so important. I've seen some educators in the US where they're able to actually schedule a block of time for teachers, 30 or 40 minutes, a short period during the day that is specifically focused on communicating with families. They know so much about your students in your classroom, and there's so much untapped knowledge that we should honor as educators. And I think as well, oftentimes teachers are talking to parents when a student does something wrong in the classroom, but just as often they should be contacting parents when the student has a win that day, when they've been, when they've supported another student, when they've done better than expected on an assessment, whatever it might be. That way, if there's situations that are happening at home, the parents also feel comfortable informing the teachers so that they have sort of a baseline that they're coming in with of knowledge about that student and can better support them.
But you make a really good point, because when parents receive a call from the school, it's always, oh dear,
Yeah.
what's gone wrong?
Mhm.
So every teacher, administrator, as best you can, for every negative, shall we say, or challenging call,
Right.
you should call and say, I want to tell you what wonderful thing happened with your child today. Takes 2 minutes, hang up the phone, counts for immeasurable communication.
All of this also makes me think about our responses to the first question when we talked
Right.
about defining well-being in our community, which also requires self-awareness on the level of the institution. So not just on an individual level, but being aware as a system, as a leader, as a community of what our needs are, what my sometimes geographical location dictates. Like this is my population dictates that my well-being is defined differently than any other institution. And that's again a level, I think, of self-awareness that goes into building these systems and thinking about how do we prevent, and if we need to intervene at any point, how do we do it, depending on my population, and not just a generic one-size-fits-all solution to every single problem, because that might not be what my community needs.
And I think especially, and I may be biased as a psychologist, but I think mental health well-being is so culturally defined. You know, I always say, if we went around the room and I asked all, everybody on this call, how do you treat the common cold? We would have 150 responses of how we treat the common cold, right? And there may be what your grandmother did. It may be what you read about. It may be what was done, what you learned from your friends. And I think, to your point, we think about well-being, it is so tied to our values, our historical knowledge, societal, broader systems. So really centering that and honoring that. And it also can change with time, with practices, with impact now, global impact. So, science, so forth. So really attending to that, the cultural piece, again, across ecologies, like you were talking about earlier, is really important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think this brings us to a point where it's appropriate to talk about hope. And so we've talked about, as we were saying, students, teachers, schools, systems. Looking ahead, what gives you hope? And from what you've seen, what you've encountered in your research, what are the most promising shifts or practices that would help a school not only academically thrive, because this is not what we're talking about. Academics will follow. Like if you're a community that is well, as healthy and strong, your academics will follow 100%. So what are your, what gives you hope? What are you excited about that you think will achieve the goals that we are talking about today?
I could start. I mean, I think, to your point about hope, it is one of the greatest protective factors in terms of well-being, having hope. I think it's essential in kind of human development and early childhood. So for me, young people give me hope. And I think the reason young people give me hope is today more than ever, I would argue, they're talking about well-being and mental health and the importance of these ideas in their own, life and day-to-day practices. And they're pushing us as, to really think about this, to integrate this into our systems. So I think they're at the center of moving this work forward. I think secondary to that, I think schools are redefining the role of kind of well-being, that we are moving away more from the traditional medical model of, psychologists or counselors own everything about mental health, and moving more to this idea that it's actually everybody's responsibility, and moving more to this whole child approach, right? And that to do this well requires prevention. And, to your point, there's also this deep integration of learning and well-being that we cannot separate those. So to me, that is very exciting that we are beginning to really hold this whole child approach, and that young people are really leading it, as they should be.
It must 100%. Yeah.
I mean, I would say our MEPLI fellows give me tremendous hope. I'm so blessed to work with such a talented and dedicated community of educators here in the Middle East. And they've done incredible work in this area, specifically on kind of community-based initiatives. There's one fellow we were with today, actually from Palestine, who has built a community library in her village and has empowered the students to advocate for their own space to be able to utilize to do, after-school tutoring or to write plays together and perform for the community. So I think those pockets certainly give me hope. And yeah, they inspire one another. They inspire me.
I guess I would say, again, I think all three of us are saying students are the reservoirs of our hope.
Right.
And when you think about students, we need to think about the assets that they bring, not the deficits, because they are the reservoir of hope. And we need to have also honest hope. Because hope without truth is folly. And truth without hope is despair. So here in the region, I think there's something like somewhere between 20% and 24% of the population, the entire regional population here in the Gulf, are children under the age 18. 20%, 25%. Those children are the future for all of us. So we need to invest in them. We need to think, where are the children? Well, they are in school. There's all sorts of chaos all around, but they're in schools. So thinking they are the future, and I agree with Fania, that's what gives me hope. Are these young people, each with tremendous assets and ready to contribute. We simply have to open the doors.
Yeah, I think where I've seen also something that gives me hope is when leaders and teachers offer opportunities for students to express their individuality. And getting back to the agency piece that you were speaking about, I remember visiting a school in Kuwait, and there was a student who had an emotional support turtle. And, not every school is going to be supportive and welcoming of a turtle going through the classrooms. But, this school embraced, that this was something that the student needed to move through the school day. And it was something that really stuck with me because you could tell that it was making an impact on that student's well-being, ability to be attentive and present in school.
Yeah, I was also thinking as Catherine was talking about, when we think about the students who are giving us hope, which is also along the lines of what some people are saying, but also mentions of differentiation and thinking about these individual differences and how, when given the right opportunities, the right resources, attention, care,
encouragement,
empathy, these students, regardless of their capabilities, they have something to offer. And it's just, you need to guide it and direct it, and you be open to it and open them up.
Welcome it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not very culturally maybe acceptable. Like they don't know how to open up someone who has been really in a narrow place for a long time. So thinking about that as well as educators. And I also was thinking about, as you were talking about hope, there are places where hope is more scarce than others. And just trying to think about, when we look into our kids' eyes, usually students' eyes, I always call them kids, you see hope. And that gives you something. And sometimes when it's more scarce, you need to dig a little deeper I guess, or if you have any ideas of how to restore that when we know teacher burnout is a thing and it's true, and especially if we think of locations again that are in conflict or there's trauma, or if you have any tips, tricks, suggestions, how do you restore it? How do you rejuvenate even when you feel depleted?
I mean, it starts with how we opened. Kay was talking about, what's the vision, what's the why for the school?
Yeah.
I would go back to, I too have sat across teachers that are like, I just can't do it, anymore. And I always go back to, what is your why in this work? The more that we can kind of center ourselves in our own why and our own integrity in this work, that can be very grounding. And I think secondary to that is similar how we're talking about unpredictability on a, systems level and what you can control and not. I always say to educators, go back to what are small things that you can control. So, you can control that conversation you have with the student. You can control like really things that, because again, often in times when we feel hopeless, we feel like we have no agency.
Yeah.
And there's always some level of agency. And agency can be thinking about when I go to bed and how can I take care of myself, what I eat, do I exercise? What do I do for fun? It can be about your own well-being. It can be about how you treat others, how you support students. So I think holding that, what is within your bubble, and starting very small. We can change the world overnight. We can change what's happening in our world overnight. It can be very unfair. But really what is at the core of why you do this, and then taking small baby steps that feel manageable to you that day.
And I've seen that a lot. I've seen a lot of teachers who just are overwhelmed. And if they can focus in, another saying that I like is a small hatchet can take down a big tree. Start small. Start small.
Yeah.
And when you see that success, then you can grow a little bit more. But start small.
Yeah. And again, I think this connects back to what we were saying, is that if we have a predictable system, a system where prevention and it's proactive and not reactive, then I know it's I feel safe. I feel like I belong. I will go to my next door teacher and knock on the door and say, do you have a minute? I need to talk something out. And as long as we have that culture of it's okay to do this, I have permission. Again, going back to that, I have permission I have access to my colleagues. I have access to families. If the kid is struggling, I have permission and access to call the family and say, hey, they're doing great with this. I need help with this. Do you have what's worked for you? How can you help me help your kid? And access to my leader. And so talking about it, I think it ties back to every single thing that we've talked about, talking about competencies. Am I well informed as an educator as well? Yeah, so I think if that makes sense, like just tying it all back together. I'd like to open up if you don't, anything else to add before we open it up?
No.
I'd like to open up the chat for questions. If you have any questions, we have time for a little Q&A. I think we have, I'm sorry, I was too engaged in the conversation. I wasn't looking at the chat. We have a question. How can schools and families collaborate to ensure that well-being protocols are consistently applied, both in educational settings and at home? Thank you, Amjad, for the question. Yeah. Any ideas?
Start. Can we start?
Yeah, I think so.
I think I go back to, this idea of ensuring that families are at the table when we are defining what is well-being, how we think about it. One of my favorite questions always to ask parents is, what was your experience like in schools?
Mm.
And secondary to that, what goal do you have for your child? And I think that can tell you so much about both hopes and dreams that a parent has, but also points of pain, points of distress.
Absolutely.
So inviting them in, versus sending a protocol home. So co-creation, I think, is key. Of really, and that can be done through short survey. I know time is tight, so it can be a survey. It can be, informal gatherings at school to have discussions, focus groups, but really getting a sense of, what do we need as a community? Then doing some work on a school level to define those things, bringing them back to families and saying, what do you think? What resonates? What do we miss? And then using that knowledge to build some consistent procedures and policies and things, right? And then I think the other piece is continuously going back to it. Sometimes we build things and then,
Move on.
year, 2, 3 passes, and we forget that families are holding many, many other things. So making sure throughout the school year, this ties back to Shailen's point of, during parent conferences and ensuring there's space for families to ask about their child's well-being, to ask about these things in an informal way before there is something, that is happening that family may need more support around. So I think just integrate as much as we can integrate this as part of our ecosystem. That tends, I have found, that tends to make families feel like we are part of this narrative.
The other thing I would add to that is making the school a welcoming place. So beyond sharing a student, teacher, parent conference, are there events that we invite parents to? And if you serve food, chances are you'll have more parents come. If you have students perform in a chorus or an orchestra or a play, parents will come. Make the school a place that parents are welcomed, because then they'll feel more comfortable in participating, because this is a joint endeavor.
Yeah. And I would also add to that it could go both ways, that it doesn't always have to be at the school.
No.
And that we should also think about, well, what works best for the parents, because their work schedules might be challenging, and also being careful of the assumptions of, if a parent is not present, that does not mean that they don't care about their child. There could be many other circumstances preventing them from being involved in what we think is the way that they need to be involved. And so in the US and other different countries, people will do home visits and they'll go and meet the family there, and then they can sort of get a picture of the setting that the child is in, or they'll go to other community centers, to mosques, to churches, et cetera, and be able to connect with families. So there's so many different avenues to utilize.
Excellent.
I think one framing idea, parents send us the best children they have.
Thank you. And this answers one of the questions we had about best practices for parents' effective engagement. So that was a good combo. We have a couple more interesting questions. One says, from Riham, in your opinion, what is the most important change we need to make in education today to prepare children not only for successful careers, but also to become responsible, empathetic, and connected members of society?
Just one change?
Just one change.
If you had to pick.
I'm biased. I can start, and I would say that well-being is integral to learning. I think the world that young people are living in today is very different than the world that we grew up in. And there's so much that we don't know about what's to come and the impact. And I think about even just social media, the pace of life that we're living in, and I think young people, more than ever, helping them understand themselves, helping them understand their emotions, helping them be able to regulate their emotions, are such essential components of one's development that really set the tone for learning, for engaging in societies, for, I think about all the kind of key social emotional learning practices that we think about. And we know, I mean, science tells us that child cannot learn until they feel safe.
Yeah.
The prefrontal cortex cannot engage until the amygdala feels calm and steady and connected to the person that's in front of them. So really, centering and integrating well-being is a central component of learning, to me, is essential as we think about kind of the future of our education in our world.
Thank you, Rania.
That's a really hard question that you've asked, but it's a good question. And I guess I would say, at least from a teacher's point of view, how you learn from mistakes, how that it's okay. And if we think about famous scientists, I'm in the field of mathematics. When people are thinking up new proofs, it's a zigzag effort. I try this way, it doesn't look really good. Oh, try that way. Well, that we learn by an iterative process. And to say to children, you don't have to be perfect the first time you try the math problem. It's where you end up. Try again.
Yeah.
Because there's such a stigma against, particularly in the field of mathematics, I have to know the answer right now. No, what we really want you to know is how to think mathematically. And that includes going back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
You taught physics, right?
Psychology.
Psychology,
Yeah,
okay.
which is the land of gray, which is not a problem. Having one definitive answer is not a problem.
It depends is our response to most things.
Which I really enjoy, and kids didn't always know how to deal with that.
Right, where's the answer?
Give me is it correct? Just to build on what you were saying, and there's an interesting question from Iman. Do we still have time? We have 1 minute. How would the teacher know the difference when they're, oh, bless you. Are you okay?
It's water. Yeah.
When teachers are scared, and because this is a sad reality, but it's reality. Sometimes you don't feel secure in your job, or just in general, like, how do you balance being scared with hope? Like, how do you make that balance, if you have any ideas?
I mean, to me, I always start by naming the thing. The more that we try to avoid or not name, I always use the analogy of, like, it's just in the basement, like lifting weights and getting stronger, right? That fear gets stronger. So I think naming that I'm scared, and here are the reasons I'm scared, right? Can in many ways feel very empowering, to acknowledge a name and not feel like this is the scary thing that I can't touch. And then equally, owning this idea of both and narrative, that just because we're scared doesn't mean we can't have hope. Just because we can't have hope doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge. And that goes to your point earlier, of naming the thing, building peer community for support, because I think often when we feel these strong emotions, we feel like we're the only ones. So it goes back to your point about teachers and peer support. There's nothing more powerful than sitting across somebody who says, me too.
Yeah.
You're not alone in this, So building your community, going, and that starts with naming, because we don't name, people don't know. And I think that can begin to have a sense of support and potentially ideas of how do we change? How do we support each other? Maybe on a small level, or even on a bigger level as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're unfortunately out of time. I'm sorry for those of you if I didn't get to your questions. I think we got carried away with the conversation. We hope you enjoyed it and you found, again, actionable, concrete steps that you can take, since we're starting school really soon. Some of you may have started already, or are in orientation, or starting next week or beginning of September. Thank you for joining us again for this QRTA talk. And of course, thank you, Catherine, Vanya, and Shaylin, for your time. I know it was very limited, and you've had long days. So thank you for giving us an hour out of your time. We hope you enjoyed this. Yeah, small baby steps can create a great result. 100%. That's a great way to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening, or depends on where you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiman.
Y'all
Thank
take care.
you.